Now, we can report that the British Foreign Secretary Robin Cook, speaking in the Philippines, has just confirmed that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died following the car crash at midnight in Paris. The Foreign Secretary said, "I am greatly shocked by this news. Our first thoughts must be with her children and family at this time of immense loss to them."
I'm Nik Gowing. I was a main presenter at BBC World News, the global television channel, for 18 years. And I was on air the night that Princess Diana died and had to make the announcement of her death. But let me tell you actually how this happened, because it's a lot different to what many will expect. I was actually in Japan a couple of days before the terrible accident happened in Paris. I was in Japan lecturing to Japanese diplomats at the Japanese Diplomatic Academy somewhere on the outskirts of Tokyo. It was pretty straightforward, and I could say rather dull, except on Friday night they all went and drank large amounts of beer and had a karaoke party, which I was expected to take part. So this is Friday night, the night before Princess Diana was killed in Paris. I then rather stumbled onto the aircraft for the 9-hour flight back to London. My wife and I, back in London, had a lot of friends round for dinner. We drank a lot of Greek metaxa. We were celebrating a great sailing holiday. So this was already in the middle of Saturday evening, which for my brain, which had been in Japan, was already well into Sunday morning, and I was beginning to wake up. But we went to bed at about 12:30, and at 1:10 the phone went. This is before the era of social media, before mobile phones. So the phone was by the bed. I pick up the phone, and it was my editor saying, "Dodi is dead, and Princess Diana may be dead. Can I come in?" Now, I'm not going to use the precise language that I used that night, but I thought it was a wind-up at 1:10 on a Sunday morning. But he convinced me very quickly that actually something terrible had taken place. So I immediately had a shower, and within an hour and 20 minutes, I was in the BBC studios in Shepherd's Bush, and I was on air.
Indeed. Well, on the line from Paris is our correspondent, Kevin Connolly. Kevin, what are the latest details you're getting?
The very latest is that you can gauge the seriousness of this crash from the fact that people are still being cut from some of the vehicles involved inside the tunnel that runs under the Pont d'Alma on one of the expressways that runs beside the River Seine. We are still only being told that the Princess of Wales is seriously injured, although I suppose some encouragement must be taken from the fact that she has been visited in hospital already. And as you know already, her companion Dodi Al-Fayed and the driver from the Ritz Hotel in Paris we were being told very soon after the accident happened, had been killed.
But it wasn't quite what you might assume. In those days, actually, BBC World News was the only 24-hour channel that the BBC was running. News 24, as it then was, hadn't yet started. So it was the only channel which could be used for continuous channel coverage on a Sunday morning, when most people don't expect people to be watching the news anyway. So I arrived in the office, and in those days the studio was actually inside the newsroom. There were a handful of my colleagues, my newsroom colleagues, but all of them were about to go home because it was the end of their shift, and there was no shift coming on until the early morning. So we had to persuade 2 or 3 of them to stay, and I then started the coverage.
James Whitaker, while we've been talking, we have been seeing pictures, the latest pictures coming in from the scene at the Pont d'Alma in Paris, where there has been an accident involving Princess Diana, in which her friend Dodi Al-Fayed has been confirmed as being killed. We can now get the latest details from Paris from one of our other correspondents in our studio here, George Arney. George, what is the latest information you are getting?
We haven't heard anything new from Paris, in fact, in the last 5 or 10 minutes.
But in those days, we did not have anything like the kind of availability of cameras and bandwidth that there is now, where people can stand in front of a camera, literally using mobile phones, and be talking live for many hours. And I had to talk to Stephen Jessel, who was a BBC radio stringer in Paris. He was only relying on AFP, Agence France Presse, and the French television channels, and he was sitting, as he put it, in his underwear in his flat, giving us a Paris version. And we remembered this not so long ago when we came together and reminisced about what happened that night.
Now we can return to our correspondent in Paris, Stephen Jessel. Stephen, let's just pick up, if we can, the basic details for those just joining us at this moment on BBC News. What we know further about the incident in the tunnel under the Pont d'Alma, which is just to the west of the centre of Paris.
What we know is that sometime around midnight, a car containing 4 people, a driver, a security guard, the princess and her companion Dodi Fayed, was in a tunnel at the Pont de l'Alma, which is just slightly to the west of Paris. It was involved in what was clearly a very serious crash. It is reported that Mr. Fayed is dead, as is the driver of the car.
But what was remarkable was the number of people who at the Pont d'Alma were phoning in or saying they were at the Pont d'Alma, which is where the accident took place, in the tunnel underneath, who said they'd seen a woman walk away from the badly damaged Mercedes car. Now, we hadn't seen pictures at that point, but they were claiming they were eyewitnesses. And what was deeply alarming and deeply disturbing that night is the number of people who wanted to contribute to the news coverage with outright lies. Fortunately, my colleagues were smart enough to realize that many of these people were, and there were only maybe half a dozen. I wasn't actually in the newsroom by this point. I'd actually gone to the main studio. But it was remarkable what had to be verified.
You can see one of the cars there, badly crunched.
Yes, eyewitness reports from the scene, Nick, say that it describe it as a terrible accident, a terrible scene, smoke billowing from the area, airbags, which we've just seen there, had exploded. It does seem to have been a rather dreadful accident indeed.
At a busy time of night in the French capital.
Exactly. The couple were coming, in fact, from the Ritz Hotel. They'd arrived in Paris earlier on Saturday, had dinner at the Ritz, which is owned by Mohammed Al Fayed, Dodi Al Fayed's father. And according to local press reports, when they left the Ritz after dinner in their car, that's when the press chase began, or the alleged press chase. Reports from the scene say they were being pursued by photographers on motorcycles at the time.
Maxine, for the moment, thank you very much indeed for updating us from the international desk on the latest news from Paris after the accident involving Princess of Wales, Diana, Princess of Wales. Well, on the line...
I think the highlight for me is the following. I knew for probably about an hour before I made the announcement of her death that actually Princess Diana was confirmed as dead. How do we know that? Well, the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, Robin Cook, was in the Philippines, and the BBC's diplomatic correspondent was travelling with him. And the ambassador in Paris phoned Robin Cook on the normal diplomatic lines from the hospital where he'd seen Diana, and Diana was confirmed as dead. And Nicholas Witchell, the BBC diplomatic correspondent, communicated that to the small operation that we had in Television Centre. And that was the confirmation that she was dead. But you can imagine we had to be absolutely sure. And so I was told, start conditioning the audience for very, very bad news. And even now it makes me feel a bit emotional, because I had to suppress my emotions while I was on air, giving him the indication that we didn't know when I knew what the outcome was going to be. And it was interesting that there was a volcanic explosion in Montserrat in the Caribbean, and several people said to me afterwards, when I bumped into them weeks later, we knew you knew because of the way you express things, the way your face changed, the way your manner changed. And then early in the morning, I think it was 7 o'clock, I made the announcement of her death.
Now, we can report that the British Foreign Secretary Robin Cook, speaking in the Philippines, has just confirmed that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died following the car crash at midnight in Paris. The Foreign Secretary said, "I am greatly shocked by this news. Our first thoughts must be with her children and family at this time of immense loss to them." The British Press Association has reported that the princess died at 4 a.m. after a cardiac arrest. The accident happened late at night in a road tunnel which carries an expressway under a bridge at the Place de l'Alma across the River Seine from the Eiffel Tower. Reports say a vehicle carrying the princess and her entourage was being chased by photographers. Police say the chauffeur of the car was killed, as well as her companion, the millionaire film producer Dodi Al-Fayed. He was the son of Mohammed Al-Fayed, the owner of the Harrods store in London. Several hours after the accident, French emergency services were still at the scene, cutting people from the wreckage. That is the car in which they were traveling. The princess was taken for emergency treatment to the intensive care unit at the Pitié-Salpêtrière hospital in southeast Paris. French police detained 5 press photographers for questioning about the events that led up to the crash.
Easy to say now, but it was a time of very difficult emotions. And you can imagine what was welling up inside me, but the aim of this is to keep your face straight. And that's what I managed to do. And also to keep your emotions and to repeat in a way which is respectful what had happened. That's how we made the announcement. I think my other reflection of the evening, I was amazed how on a Sunday morning, early on the Sunday morning, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, people came home from parties, dinner, whatever they were doing, enjoying themselves. And before they went to bed, these are television people, they switched on the television. And my editor-in-chief, Rachel Atwell, I remember her saying, I switched on the television, bit the worse for wear. And you were sitting there broadcasting, and I hadn't the first clue what it was all about. Again, because there were no mobile phones, we just had bleepers in those days. And so she only realized when there was seriously difficult news being confronted by the BBC operation, when she saw me on air preparing to make the announcement. It is a moment to remember. I can't forget it, almost 30 years ago now. And it's remarkable the number of people around the world when I'm traveling who say, you made the announcement of Princess Diana's death. And of course I had to say yes, and I tell them a similar story. But it was by chance, by luck, by good fortune, and fortunately the BBC got it right that night. We made all the right calls. We made all the right calls to Buckingham Palace and elsewhere to be absolutely sure that the news we were giving was correct, grim though it was.
Welcome to BBC News from London, as Britain and the rest of the world mourns the death of Diana, the Princess of Wales. I'm Nik Gowing. She was the Queen Britain never had, and as the royal family drew together in grief, tributes flowed in from all over the world for the often troubled but greatly loved and admired princess. Britain has embarked upon a period of deep national mourning. A service in her memory at St Paul's Cathedral in London was packed to overflowing. Candlelit vigils are taking place overnight outside Buckingham Palace and at her London home, Kensington Palace.